I'm going to put the slide up. And they should be seeing it. Out. Now. 22 seconds.
Hello and welcome to the BIM for Infrastructure webinar series. Today we have the model-based delivery in design and construction brought to you by the Highway Engineering and Exchange Program, TRB AED 80, BIM for Infrastructure Subcommittee, and Building Smart USA chapter. Before we get started, I just wanted to say these things don't put themselves together by themselves. And I just wanted to thank a lot of the people that were instrumental in putting this together. Will Sharp, Sandra Larson, Chess Meyer, Alexa Mitchell, Ben Chilk, Connor Christian, John Wilkerson, and Kevin Gilson. From the HEEP organization, the president, Elaine Richard, vice president, Vern Danforth, and former president, Randy Robinson. From TRB, Lance Parvey and Chuck Hickson, and Ian Howell from Building Smart International. Next slide. So let's go through some housekeeping. First of all, we are recording this call. If you're showing anonymous, that's to be expected. That's just how the Teams Live event works when you log in. And if you go to type a message in the Q&A, you can either type your name or stay as anonymous. If you're having issues with the audio, you probably have us muted or your volume's at 0. You need to change that in the settings or on your computer sound. Next slide. So here is hopefully a screenshot of what you're seeing. You're probably not seeing the video portion, but really quickly on the top right, there is a Q&A image, and just click on that icon to activate the Q&A. When you came in, it was probably already activated. If you look down at the bottom, there's a slider that will allow you, since this is a live event, you can rewind it, or you can pause it, or you can skip to the live spot if you're behind. The only other thing is, if you are having some issues, it's going to be a Microsoft Teams issue, and there is some help on that you can look at with that gear at the top right as well. Next slide. So what we have published in the Q&A right now is a direct link to some polling that we're going to be doing today. If you open up your browser and you have another tab and click on that direct link, it will take you there. Or if you do it on your phone, you can go to menti.com and type in the code 89191465. You don't need to remember that because we're going to have that at the bottom of each one of the poll slides. So if you don't get in with that initial link that's in the chat or in the Q&A, you'll be able to do this when the slides come. Next slide. So let's do our first poll. What's your background? Public agency, contractor, consultant, academia, vendor, or other? So as you can see down at the bottom, it says go to menti.com and use the code. But if you're already in there, just go ahead and start voting. And we'll have some results of these coming later on. And this one as well will come soon. Next slide. So today we have basically the BIM for Infrastructure's webinar series, and today we're going to focus on model-based delivery and model as the legal document. My name's George Lukes. I'm the Standards and Design Engineer with Utah Department of Transportation. We have quite a few speakers lined up today, and it should be a great event. Today we're going to be talking about in this webinar, it's the first in a series that's going to explore opportunities and challenges with this shift to building information modeling, which is basically using data and digital delivery throughout the United States. This webinar is going to show some practical applications. It's going to talk about some of the national things that are going on, and it's basically related to the design and construction in the transportation projects in the industry today. Next slide. So we're first going to have a plenary session, and that's going to be a national look at what's going on in the BIM world. Then we're going to have 3 DOTs talk about their perspective on moving to digital delivery and their experience with models of legal document. And then we're going to wrap it up with a contractor panel discussion on model-based design. So these are the results that we're going to show onto your screen right now. And you should be able to also see this, I believe, on the Menti, but if not, it looks like, and I'm going to have a hard time seeing this, but it looks like we've got a substantial number of consultants and DOT folks on here. Let's go to the next slide, Randy. So today our sponsors are the Highway Engineering Exchange Program. This basically is promoting the use of knowledge and technology in the transportation industry. We have peer exchanges for knowledge, experience, and best practices. We've been around for 60 years. It's nonprofit. It's basically civil engineers, IT professionals, and a lot of our vendor partners. It's managed by the members and run through transportation agencies. There are no membership fees. You can find us at HEEP.org. Next slide. This is made up of a whole bunch of different organizations. So this is engineers, IT professionals, technology partners. We're in the United States, Canada, Europe, federal highways, and municipalities. And our partners are consulting engineers, contractors, and transportation-related technology vendors, as well as academia. From here, I'm going to hand it off to one of our other vendors, or one of our other sponsors, Building Smart USA. That's Ian Howell.
Thank you, George. Building Smart is a vendor-neutral, not-for-profit international organization focused on developing open standards for the design, construction, and operation of building and infrastructure projects. We're a member-based organization with 25 chapters worldwide. We hold 2 international summits each year, and in fact, there's one currently running as a virtual summit, which you can find details of on buildingsmart.org. We partner with other international standards bodies such as OGC, GS1, and ISO. Our members sponsor projects, and those projects are run through 3 programs, which you can see at the bottom. A user program, which is about information exchange requirements and work practices on projects. Our standards and solutions process, which is an international consensus process for creating open standards, and a compliance program which includes professional certification of individuals as well as software vendor certification of applications. The US chapter is all about engaging US industry stakeholders in our work and specifically supporting AASHTO in adopting the IFC schema as a national standard for roads and bridges, and collaborating with HEEP to provide education and training for industry professionals that are involved with transportation infrastructure projects. And thank you for the opportunity to co-sponsor.
Welcome, glad you have joined us today. My name is Lance Parvey from WSP as BIM Services Director, previously with Wisconsin DOT and also serving as TRB AED 80 BIM for Infrastructure Subcommittee. One of the supporting and sponsoring organizations. Over the last decade as co-chairs of the TRB BIM Subcommittee, Chuck Hickson and I, along with TRB Subcommittee, have been involved in advancing BIM and projects, practices, and applied research as we see the state of the industry increasingly adopt BIM. FHWA and AASHTO have been great partners leading the way with TRB along with consultants involving BIM, applied BIM research initiatives. At our TRB BIM subcommittee, the following are focus group areas if you're interested in getting involved with, from project delivery to asset management, to open BIM standards, to performance analytics, and to data governance. A few key current applied research topics include digital as-builts, BIM and asset management O&M, BIM ROI, and BIM CAD GIS integration. Feel free to reach out at these email addresses to Chuck and I and we'll be having a next quarterly meeting in April 8th, if interested in these BIM areas and applied research. And now on to the webinar.
So for the plenary session, we'll start with Mike Kennerly giving an update on the AASHTO involvement and activity.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing with the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards. I'm with the Iowa Department of Transportation. I am the director for the Design Bureau for the Iowa DOT, and our committee is co-chaired by Jennifer Lloyd from Tennessee DOT. When we put this committee together, we had a pretty good cross-section. We've got 17 state DOT represented, 2 consulting firms, the FHWA, Bentley, and then some industry partners in addition to Bentley in terms of Autodesk, Trimble. We've got the AGC, and then there are others who joined the committee as well as friends. And one of the things that we tried to do in terms of diversifying the committee, there are representatives from highway design, bridge design, and construction and materials. You know, when we put the committee together, we had 3 primary goals. The first one was to start to take a look at what does it take from a data standpoint to move from traditional 2D plans to being able to provide 3D plans, then ultimately being able to provide a BIM model that could be used for asset management and that whole managing of your infrastructure throughout its life cycle. One of the other things that we recognized that was really important was the fact that at this point in time, we really didn't have a non-proprietary open standard. And from the standpoint of interoperability, that was really crucial. And so one of the goals of the committee was to try to figure out if we could recommend a non-proprietary format or come up with one that we felt would be suitable for the industry and for the agencies at large. You know, and then the third one was to start to take a look at, you know, what were some of the best practices? What were some of the things other DOTs were doing that we could share? What was going on in the industry that we could share, just to help us move this knowledge base along a little bit faster and prevent anybody from feeling like they had to reinvent the wheel. You know, so from that, we developed our initial work plan. You know, and one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to conduct a survey to determine what the needs were. And we wanted to focus on where the industry was headed. You know, and so one of the things that we looked at was, was trying to get a survey of both our construction folks and then the AGC. And thankfully, that was something that we were actually able to leverage from the AASHTO Committee on Construction. They had already done a similar survey, and so we just used their results to help feed our effort. The other thing that we wanted to do, and we knew was important, was developing guidance on level of detail, level of development, and level of accuracy, and, you know, the model-centric environment, you know, just trying to help people understand what are the steps, what are the things that you have to do, have to consider as you move from that traditional plan set that we've always done to a model-centric plan set. You know, and then one of the other things that we, like I indicated, we wanted to do was take a look at how could we enhance interoperability? And you know, that is highlighted as completed, which I'll explain in a minute, and ongoing, which I'll explain in a minute. But then also develop guidance on the electronic or, you know, intelligent plan for a BIM model. Now, one of the things that we all know when it comes to interoperability, we have data. All of us have data, and if you're a transportation agency, you have boxes of it, you know, the servers full of it. But unfortunately, it's like it's in a relationship that doesn't communicate very well. You know, and that issue of interoperability, you know, when you really start to take a look at it, has a huge impact on the industry. When we started to take a look at this, one of the things that we found was that it's costing the U.S. $15.8 billion a year. The fact that we can't share information seamlessly, that there's duplication, that people have to recreate the data, that's costing us $15.8 billion a year. And so one of the things that we did when we looked at, developing our another schema similar to TransXML, which we knew would be a heavy lift and time consuming. But then we also started to look around and we saw what Building Smart International was doing and already had done. And we thought that that would be a natural connection for us in terms of our efforts to ensure interoperability. And so our committee in 2019 at the October AASHTO CEO meeting proposed a resolution that the state transportation agencies adopt IFC as the national standard. And thankfully, that was unanimously passed by both the chief engineers of the AASHTO state DOTs and the CEOs of the AASHTO state DOTs. And there were really three things they wanted us to do. And as part of that resolution, they wanted us to take a look at, what's it going to take for us to adopt the standard. They wanted to develop a cross-discipline committee that would help guide AASHTO in this effort. And then the third thing that they wanted us to take a look at was AASHTO actually becoming a member of IFC, or excuse me, of Building Smart International, and then having a seat at that table to help us have a voice in the development of that schema. And so once we got that adopted, we took a look at, where would we go next in terms of our efforts as a committee. We have an ongoing effort right now of putting together what we call a BIM maturity model. And really what that's going to boil down to is taking you from, point A to point Z in terms of all the phases that you go through to get from 2D plans to an electronic model and the things you need to consider along the way. Some states have already made some advances in this, and rather than other states having to reinvent the wheel, the ideal is to take those lessons learned and put them in a document so that as other state agencies or entities want to embark down this road, they've kind of got a roadmap in terms of how to do that. The other thing that's been really important when you start talking about BIM is level of development. And so we're putting together a level of development guide that agencies can use, some guidance on how to develop an intelligent plan. That connection between BIM and asset management is critical for state agencies. And so we're trying to also to provide some guidance and some thoughts on how do you move from BIM, the whole idea of creating the data, to then transferring that into your agency's asset management system. And then one of the other things that we've done, and that was part of the feedback that we got from that survey, was that we were looking at developing a webinar series on BIM related topics. And so far we've had two, and we're going to have one each month, pretty much throughout the year. We're going to take a couple of months off, August and September in the summer. But other than that, we're moving along. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the BIM for Infrastructure Pooled Fund. Iowa DOT is lead state on that and working with FHWA to get this off. So far, we've got several commitments from the FHWA, Arizona DOT, Kentucky, Michigan, New York State DOT, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And the good news is we've really made some good strides so far, but the reality is we are still a long way from where we need to go. And so in terms of other states jumping on board, we're really encouraging greater participation because we think that this effort is going to be key in terms of bringing a lot of those things that are going on together under one roof. Because this one takes a look at the broad perspective of BIM. And again, I think that will help us as we start to look at how we move this initiative forward. The scope of work includes developing the BIM use case, and that's always been important because people always ask, what's the return on investment? Why should I do this? And so one of the aspects of this is developing that use case, and then establishing some BIM processes. And the reality is when you start to look at moving from your traditional platform into a BIM platform, your processes are going to change. How you develop projects are going to change. How you interact with your customers, all of that is going to change. And so, looking at what those processes are, and then giving states guidance on how to get there. Looking at enhancing our skills and collaboration, because again, this is going to create a new platform that I think will enhance collaboration a great deal. But how do we do that? How do we share an electronic file? We're used to sharing paper files, but how do we share and review and approve electronic documents? And what are the things that you have to know, or the steps you have to take? And then start to look at deploying the management tools and techniques that are associated with that. And then again, the last one is information exchange. And when it comes to BIM, that's what this is all about: information exchange from the planning phase all the way through asset management. There's a link there at the bottom for those of you who would like to become involved or get more details. And I would encourage you to really consider that highly, and hopefully make that one of your goals for this year. Now, the next thing up there is a Mentimeter poll. And as part of this, BIM for Infrastructure Pooled Fund, one of the questions that we wanted to ask are, what are suggestions for areas of focus for the new BIM for Infrastructure Pooled Fund? And just select all of them that apply for you, but we want to get your feedback in terms of helping us understand what are the needs and what are the issues that that you folks feel are important for us to consider as this move forward. So, go ahead and take a minute and participate in that poll.
Ahmed, are you ready to start with your update?
Yes, I was waiting. Thanks, Will.
Yep.
Good morning, or maybe good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Abu Hawaj. I'm the Chief Structural Engineer for Iowa DOT, and I chair ASHTO Bridges and Structures Technical Committee on Software and Technology. I will be giving an update on the activities of the BIM for Bridges and Structures initiative. BIM for Bridges and Structures is an initiative that is being led by the ASHTO Bridges and Structures Technical Committee on Software and Technology. This initiative is about the exchange of information in the form of 3D digital models from planning to asset management. It's about managing transportation infrastructure assets more efficiently throughout their life cycle, where BIM can be viewed as a data management strategy. This data management strategy is aimed at providing data across multiple platforms where data can be exchanged, regardless of what software was used to create it. The 5-year project kicked off in 2018. The objective of this initiative is to develop national standards, guidelines, and manuals to support the use of IFC as a national exchange standard for bridges and structures, and to establish data requirement for key data exchanges for the life cycle of the structures model. And lastly, collaborate with other entities to incorporate the national and international BIM efforts. There are four major aspects of the project. First, the investigation and exploration of existing initiatives and terminology. Second is the IFC development standards and model view definitions. Third is the collaboration and implementation, working with designers, contractors, fabricators, software vendors, and developers, and building smart international. And finally, performing economic analysis. As you would expect, bridge owners and stakeholders want to see the return on investment in order to buy in. Next slide, please. As with any major initiatives, it's very important to establish a roadmap that captures the objective and to keep us focused on the goals. I realize this graphic is very hard to read and has a lot of information, but it is available online. I wanted to highlight the partners involved. So far, we have 24 state DOTs and FHWA. Obviously, we want all 50 states to participate. The anticipated outcome of this initiative is the development of Information Delivery Manual, IDM, and Model View Definition, MVD, for the data exchanges. This major task involves the validation of existing bridge lifecycle process map and data dictionary, researching common terms for bridge taxonomy for naming elements, evaluating data structure and level detail requirements, and generating exchange requirements. Another outcome is the development of software certification materials and the deployment of stakeholder training. Next slide. Our goal for 2021 is to complete the Information Delivery Manual, IDM, and Model View Definition, MVD, for common bridges. Coordinate with IFC 4.3 Infra's extension project, provide software vendors with testing materials, and finally begin the return on investment study. Next. Working with AASHTO committees, we anticipate balloting IDM and MVD for the design to construction exchange in 2022. I'm happy to say that we have been working with the National Steel Bridge Alliance, AASHTO Collaboration Group, TG15, to produce an IDM for the data exchange from design fabrication. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike and Ahmed, for some great presentations. My name is Will Sharp. I'm the Global Director of Highways with HDR, and I've had the pleasure of working closely with George, Mike, and Ahmed for several years on many national BIM initiatives, including serving as one of the ACEC reps on the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards. So we have a few questions that we've gotten from our audience, and Mike, I think the first one's for you. I know, Mike, that you've closed. I know, Mike, that I guess the question is this digital delivery process limiting the number of contractors that can bid on projects? And I know, Mike, you've worked a lot with Iowa AGC and nationally, so can you answer that question, please?
I'll take a stab at it. It really depends on, unfortunately, really depends on your agency and your community. Right now, I think that most contractors are moving toward AMG, and so I don't think it's as limiting as it would have been 5 years ago. I think the really critical thing as you're developing your plan for initiating this is to sit down with the agency and find out where they are, and then try to tailor your particular state's model based on where the industry is. But I think for the most part, you're finding that more and more contractors are investing in AMG, and it's not as limiting as it would have been 5 years ago.
Okay, great, Mike. And we have one other question for you, Mike. How did Iowa DOT become so heavily involved in taking the lead in model-based delivery?
One of the things I think that we benefit from at the Iowa DOT is that our leadership has been very proactive in innovation and has encouraged it consistently. When we got into this about 16 years ago, actually now, our director was heavily involved in pushing us in this direction. And so we've really had really great support, and it's really been a key initiative for us. So I think that has been the key for us.
Okay, now that sounds great, Mike. And I did have one for you, Ahmed. How can contractors get involved with the BIM for Bridges pooled fund efforts?
Well, I believe they could just contact any members of participating states, myself, or just basically they could Google pooled fund BIM for bridges and structures and get the contact information.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, why don't we go to the next slide, please, and we can show you the Mentimeter results for Mike's question earlier. So Randy, if you can bring those results in and make that a little bigger if you could. Thank you. So now this, we really appreciate your input to this. I know, Mike, I know the state DOTs and FHWA are currently scoping out the effort for the BIM for Infrastructure pooled fund study. So I think this would be very valuable input to consider in that scoping effort. And one thing I would suggest, if there's any additional other topics that you've got, please put those in the Q&A so we can capture those. Because I know, Mike, you're definitely interested in input on this and from this audience today. But any comments on this, Mike?
Actually, Will, it lines up, I think, well with what we see as the needs, and I think this really helps reinforce the direction that the pooled fund, is going to go. And I know that Catherine Petrus from the FHWA would agree with that. So I really appreciate this because I think it validates what we're trying to do and what we think needs to be done. So this is great.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds great. Well, we can go to the next slide, and we're going to turn it over. I'm going to turn it over now to George Lukes to cover our next section of the webinar on the state DOT's movement to digital delivery. So take it away, George.
Thanks, Will. So we're going to move forward here. I'm, again, George Lukes from Utah Department of Transportation. We're going to look at moving from digital delivery and model as the legal document in this part. We're going to have a little overview of what's going on nationally, and then we'll move into what UDOT, Florida, and Iowa are doing. Next slide. So that was the intro. There we go. Let's first do a quick Menti poll. Are you doing model-based digital delivery or digital construction? If you would go and vote right now, that's great. If you have not gone to Menti yet, you can see that the address and the code is on the bottom. Your voting helps everyone to see what's going on. It helps us to kind of know where things are going as well. All right, next slide. And we'll show the results of that here in a minute. So let me talk a little bit with models, the legal document, and how we got here. Everyone knows that, 50, 60 years ago, it was a room full of engineers in, black slacks and white shirt, black tie, doing the drafting. And that moved to professional drafters. And then we had the first generation of CAD, where we still printed out the CAD in a paper format. And then we started getting CAD with PDF deliveries and starting to sign those with digital signatures and things of that nature. And, even as early as 2000, contractors started building models, in various contractor formats by looking at the plan sets and trying to build models that way. And as that started going along, contractors started asking designers if they could have their files because it made it easier for them to get that start. And as things have moved even further, we started the e-construction revolution. And now we're at the beginning of the data revolution, where data is going to become the center of everything. So where are we going with this? Well, one of the things that is being worked on nationally, and Mike touched a little bit on this with the Joint Technical Committee, is that we want to build a repeatable digital process from design to construction. Today, everyone knows how to use a traditional plan set, whether that's in the pre-construction side and doing reviews, at the advertising side with contractors doing bids, or on the construction side with contractors and construction crews. And what we want to do is have a repeatable process that is the digital side of that without having a paper or 2D representation. Developing that digital as-built workflow is also something that's coming on. EDC 6 is starting right now, and that's digital as-built specifically. And then that's going to build into a digital twin as a repository is the ultimate vision for a DOT, where we may have digital twins with all the projects and take that information and put it into a DOT's digital twin. But that's kind of getting in front of ourselves, and today is more about using the model-based delivery, and the model is the legal document in design and construction. Next slide. So DOTs today are in different stages. Some have awarded the model as the legal document. I know Iowa, New York, Florida, and UDOT have all done that, and there may be others. Some are right there and are really wanting to see what they need to do to get there. PennDOT has Digital Delivery 2025, where they've got a formal plan to get there and have all their projects by 2025. Michigan, Oregon, and there are others. They're right there, or maybe they've actually awarded projects with the model as the legal document also. Some of the projects are using mobile devices for civil. Some are using rovers in the field as well. But almost everyone have heard these buzzwords: model is a legal document, MALD, digital delivery, BIM for infrastructure, digital twins, existing condition database. And everyone seems to be knowing that this is the direction to go because it's going to make us tons more efficient and it's going to give us data everywhere we need it. So in this track, you're going to hear from UDOT, Iowa, and Florida on their progress. So what we're going to be looking at is projects that have been completed, some of the challenges and lessons learned, future plans, and agency drivers for model and the legal document. So let's do another Mentimeter. Again, if you're not in there already, and it looks like we don't actually have it on the bottom of this slide, but there should be in the chat a direct link to the Mentimeter. Are you doing model-based digital delivery or digital construction? So if you'll vote now, that would be great, and then we'll look at the results here shortly. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about UDOT. UDOT has been looking at making the model the legal document since about 2014. Next slide. Essentially what we did was we started and in 2016 we did our very first project where we awarded the model as a legal document, and at the time it was called 3D Engineered Models for Construction. We thought that intelligent design and construction sounded like a better way to sort of characterize this, and at the time we were looking at getting information to projects where they could use AMG, automated machine guidance, and kind of start that transition from using our 3D models only in design to make 2D plan sets to getting to a 3D construction. From there, we started focusing on making the model the legal document on bid build projects and reducing the plan sheets, or at least all the documentation we put on that. And we thought that model-based design and construction was a better characterization of it at the time. So we referred to it as MBDC. And today we have now moved toward a digital delivery where we're using models and digital files to convey the design intent. And instead of cutting sheets, we're relying on digital review tools and digital devices or mobile devices in the field to see the model. Next slide. So to date, we have awarded 14 projects with the model as a legal document. 5 of those have been CMGC, and that's just where the contractor sits in on the pre-construction side to help us address the risk of the model being the legal document. And 9 of them have been bid build. And on all of those projects, we're using rovers in the field and mobile devices for the civil features. 9 of those projects are fully constructed. Of those, 7 awarded without cutting any sheets. So we're not putting out a plan set for the most part. 2 of those are fully constructed and 5 are in construction right now as two season projects. We are trying, and I think we're right there of building a repeatable process where we have a workspace for Open Roads Designer. We're adding metadata to signs, striping, guardrail, and barrier, and we're transferring information from design to construction. What we're looking at doing is having a consistent naming convention for everything. We've got links in individual assets that will allow the person in the field to see the information. We've got attachments, and we've got standard attributes on almost all of our items now. We're doing CAD to GIS, where we have validation of our CAD standards and the ability to have a GIS workflow on every single project. Next slide. So we have an aid grant that we were awarded for $1 million, and on that aid grant, we have a large team of consultants and contractors. We have Kimberly Horn, Horrocks, HDR, Avenue, Lochner, and Michael Baker, and on our contractor side, we've got Clyde and Wadsworth. We've got committees that are consists of UDOT, internal consultants and contractors. We've had a lot of vendor involvement, namely Bentley, Autodesk, Esri, Trimble, and Bluebeam. And we have developed a model development standards manual that is out on our website. EDC 6, we have a heavy involvement with digital as-builts. Next slide. So this is just a quick shot of our website, and I've got that information coming up in a future slide. Next slide. So the vision for the future. Next slide. We're essentially looking at tools in the kind of second generation. Bentley Synchro is one of them. It's one that we have live on a project right now. We're also using Bentley iTwin Review. That's for review at Plan in Hand and PS&E. We're using Esri products. These are screenshots of live projects that we're using in the field. We're using Collector to write information to our databases. It gives people in the field all the information they need. Next slide. We're also piloting Autodesk projects on their BIM 360 platform. We'd like to get to the point where we can say, it doesn't matter what you use, we just need the data flow, and that's what we are piloting right now with Autodesk. We're also piloting Trimble products, both their Site Vision and Quadri, and we expect to see those coming soon. Our challenges are the tools are still in their infancy, even with the second generation. Our Esri products are not 3D and they don't meet all our needs. They're disconnected. Volume calculations are a struggle, and so is data integration. Our crews are not asking to go back to paper products, but they are saying that we're throwing a lot of tools at them and that it would be great if we just gave them one tool to work with. And we're concerned about the costs and the licensing, so that's going to be an issue. For more information, go to our website, digitaldelivery.udot.utah.gov. And from there, I'm going to hand that off to, I believe it's Ahmed.
Yeah, this is Ahmed Abu-Hawash again. In this segment of this webinar, I will discuss Iowa's perspective on digital delivery. As Mike mentioned earlier, Iowa DOT has a long history of providing digital models on highway construction projects. As early as 2006, we provided contractors digital files for information only. In 2015, we piloted the first grade and pave project with digital files as the controlling document. In 2016, we led 6 more projects where we issued digital files as the controlling documents if the contractor chose to use automated machine guidance for either grading or paving. And in 2017, digital files became the controlling document on all in-house developed projects if AMG is used by the contractor. Next. On the bridges and structures side, we piloted our first BIM project with model as the legal document in 2018. The demonstration project is located at a major interchange in eastern Iowa. It included 3 curved steel bridges with a total length of 4,200 feet. Our goal was to develop the BIM model as complete as possible with the given software. We wanted to evaluate software and identify advantages and disadvantages of each. And also, we wanted to encourage contractors' use. We wanted contractors to become more familiar with the software, and provide feedback for future improvement. For our first BIM project, our approach was to engage our local contractors early on. We met with our local AGC contractors on regular basis, starting about 2 years before the letting. We had many discussions on how we would deploy the model. Initially, we thought about providing BIM models for information only and include traditional 2D plan sets. But our contractors suggested that we should require the use of the model and not provide 2D plan sets. The thinking was that if the model was provided for information only, its use would be very limited. So we decided on a hybrid approach, provide the model for all 3 bridges, but make the legal document required on 1 bridge only. Another feature of this pilot project is the training. With the contractors and the subs being unfamiliar with the software, we focused on providing training before and after the letting. We didn't want any contractors or sub being prevented from bidding. Training was provided to both DOT staff and potential bidders. And we recorded 1-hour training video and posted it online. Also, the software vendor agreed to provide free support. Some of the lessons learned from our pilot project, we heard from our stakeholders that the model was used repeatedly for visualization. There were many software limitations. Although improvements have been made since, there's still significant development needed in the software to make digital deliverable a common practice for bridge construction. Another area of concern is the contractor's experience and capability. At this time, only large contractors have the capability to make full use of the model due to the limited staff experience and not having the proper hardware and software. The free software that we provided to the bidders have limited features, so contractors needed to invest in additional software to take full advantage of the model. Subcontractors and material suppliers are relying on the prime contractor to obtain information from the model. There were challenges with pulling certain information from the model. Field condition made it difficult working with iPads and laptops in lieu of 2D plans. And lastly, it was tough getting buy-in from senior staff. Next slide. Moving forward, we plan on investigating digital as-built models for asset management. For our pilot project, the designer is updating the BIM model to include as-built information. We plan on delivering more infrastructure projects, roads and bridges, using digital models. And we will require 3D models on new or replacement structure projects. We want to develop BIM model development standards manual like Utah had done. We wanted to establish internal collaboration across functional boundary lines. And finally, we wanted to finalize our strategic plan and roadmap for digital delivery. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, looks like Florida's up. My name is Vern Danforth. I'm the State CAD Engineer Coordinator. I serve the department to lead our BIM and CAD technology efforts, advancing implementation, customization, training, and support. I'm also a board member on HEEP, and I serve with the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee. Here at Florida, we recognize that transitioning to BIM is a process that it doesn't happen overnight. Just like the Appalachian Trail, we see it as a long journey, not a race. There'll be many mountains to climb, many crests and valleys to traverse. Specifically, our timeline started with 3D initiatives back in 2009 when we started research and developing 3D for design. In 2015, we published CAD standards to support 3D deliverables specifically for AMG, which the deliverables were derivatives of our actual designs that the contractors could leverage to use automated machine guidance equipment in the field. In 2018, the concept of next generation plans was adopted, and we started moving towards that to support 3D models when the model is a legal document. So we recognize that our current plan set has to evolve to be for information only when the model is a legal document, and that we still will have some semblance of plans that support the model just for communication in some areas. In 2020, we actually had 2 pilot projects contracted with models as a legal document and next-gen plans, and we've got about another dozen in the schedule to move forward as we go throughout these next 10 years or so. In 2021, all projects are to use model-centric design software, Civil 3D, OpenRose Designer, or OpenBridge Modeler, and any other design software that might meet the CAD standards and requirements. Going forward, this year we're working on our CAD standards for BIM delivery as we develop those, and beyond 2021, as I mentioned, more pilot projects are planned for BIM delivery and next-gen plans. Next slide, please. We do have a lot of work to do. We're investigating, as George said, non-CAD tools to review project models. We're also looking at BIM 360, iTwin Design Review, Quadri, and the like. We're also developing BIM standards, currently working with AASHTO on the model element breakdown development, level of development standards. We have an internal BIM technical advisory team. It's interdepartmental for developing our BIM maturity model going forward. We're developing an asset management workflow, CAD to GIS, similar to what Utah is doing. We're developing project scoping guidelines for BIM with BIM execution plan standards, and developing guidelines on projects where we'll use the model as a legal document, what I like to call to BIM or not to BIM, that is the question. We'll also be looking at developing digital as-built BIM standards and guidelines going forward. Next slide. What I would say here is we're involved in many of these different organizations, and if not for our input, but also for knowledge sharing. There's a lot of intelligent people. If you're not involved in these, I recommend that you try to get involved with them. You'll learn a lot, and you'll make a lot of contacts for your specific DOT moving forward. Next slide. Some of our future activities are really evolved around communicating the direction, training. We've been training annually on 3D since 2011. You know, we're currently engaging ACEC to roll out a 10-course training curriculum to our consultant base here in Florida. Our office just can't reach out enough people or do enough training classes, so we've engaged in ACEC to help us with that. We also are coordinating changes and directions with our district production managers, making sure ACEC Florida is involved, the Florida Transportation Builders Association, and other technical advisory committees. So we recognize that we need to do more communications with final plans, CEI contracts, construction and CEI's estimations, and then maintenance and operations. Next slide. And that's going to ask us to involve many more people, district project managers, the program management office for our production schedules, the district construction offices, final estimates. So we have a lot of outreach to still do in the department. And that is an overview of where Florida's at this point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much to George, Ahmed, and Vern for sharing your state perspectives on where you are with Model as a Legal Document. I'm Sandra Larson with Stanley Consultants. I'm the Transportation Innovation Strategies Leader, and we now are going to have a few minutes here for a Q&A for these 3 speakers. So George, Ahmed, and Vern. George, let's start with you. Here's a question that we received ahead of the webinar. How are digital plan sets stamped by a licensed engineer, and how is the design protected from being modified after signing?
You know, it's a great question. Hear it all the time. We don't do a digital signature within the model. What we've done is the engineer of record sends out a memo, and the memo basically says that we're a Bentley state at the moment, and that's what we put out for our designs in Open Roads Designer. And it says, here are the DGN files that are the legal document until I say otherwise. And then they also list all of the reference files that go along with it. We use ProjectWise, and the stamp on there is a timestamp that if it's changed, it will show in the thread. So we've got a repository for all of our legal documents that show exactly when it was. It makes it pretty easy in that regard. As far as the model changing, I think that there's a bit of a terminology here, meaning a lot of times there's more than one model. There's the model that the DOT uses and then the model that the contractor uses. We pretty much have just said the model we've got is the legal document. And if the contractor changes the model and they go out in the field and they do some grading, we're going to go out with a rover, check that surface, and compare it back to the legal document. So we kind of put the contractor in the position that they need to build that model correctly because the actual legal model is our document.
Thank you, George. Ahmed, the same question. So how are digital plan sets stamped by a licensed engineer, and how is the design protected from being modified after signing?
So it's somewhat similar to what Utah does. So typically we have a special provision that would have the designer, the engineer's seal, and a list of all the files that are covered. And we're not really concerned about the security aspect of it because it's not being updated and sent back to the designer. Once it's issued, that is the final legal document. In the future, when we do as-built, that's controlled by the engineer of record.
All right, thank you so much. Vern?
So Florida DOT, on the two pilot projects that we led with a model as a legal document, we actually had the engineers put their digital signatures in the design files, and there's a process for doing that. And then we went ahead and set those to be read-only as they were delivered. It was quite a tedious process. It was definitely something that we recognize needs streamlining. We're looking at possibly some alternative ways to do to accomplish the same objective going forward, and looking at what some of the ideas that other DOTs are implementing. So,
thank you, Vern.
sure.
And just one comment for the people on the webinar. Those questions that we are not able to get to today that come in during the webinar, we will be publishing them with some answers on the HEEP website following the webinar. So next question, again, this is one that came in ahead of time. Ahmed, let's start with you on this one. What quality control and security methods are possible with digital delivery?
Quality control is still work in progress. Since we haven't done too many BIM projects, it's still something we're working through. I don't really have a good answer for it, but it's still work in progress. Security hasn't been an issue yet, just like I mentioned earlier, because we're not having that back and forth between the contractor and the DOT.
Thank you, Vern.
So to address the quality control, the two projects that we implemented in design, one was done in-house, one was done by a consultant with a very close relationship with our Turnpike Authority. And so on both of those, the quality control was done without a formal process. So recognize one of the feedbacks, or one of the things that we recognize from that, is that we need to develop a chapter for QCing models, which we currently it's just about ready to be published, where we have a 5-step process defined on how to go through QCing a model. And then as far as the security goes, I think it's been addressed that once the model is a legal document and you put it in your archive, then that is just where it stays. It's just a version of it, and then you hand off the files to the contractor. He can do with them as he wishes. But if there's ever a dispute or something that needs to be checked, you're always going to go back to the archive document that is the model, the legal record.
Thank you, Vern. And George.
You know, QC is an issue, and what I mean specifically is it's not necessarily the model, and we've had a lot of internal discussion about this. We look at it more as the design process QC, and the model is just a tool to give us information. So we've used modeling for a long, long time, and the output from the model has been what we've QC'd the plan sets. We don't have a formal process at the moment. Some of the things we've done is had a copy of the DGN that our oversight will look at and go through and compare it to the DGN and give comments, but it's not something that we have a formal process for. And I've got basically the same answer as Vern and Ahmed, that the security is based on the legal document being locked down in our system.
Thank you so much. We have time, just a brief moment. I'm going to ask one question, and George, I'm going to address this one to you. What are digital review tools being used for legal documentation?
So, you know, we don't actually use the digital review tools as the documentation. What we're using is the DGN itself. The tools that we use have been a little bit different depending on where we were in the process. So even though we had plans as for information only, the tools were a little bit of a struggle in pre-construction, and so we still used plan sets to do the reviews. What we've moved to now is digital reviews, and we've used different methodology. We've tried to use our GIS tools, and we've had some success with that. We've used in the past, maybe a couple of years ago, we used Open Roads Navigator, and that's a challenge. You know, those folks that are in design can use it, and it's something that they're familiar with. But when you get with construction or ITS or others, it's very difficult to train them. So we've moved now to using Bentley iTwin Review. That's looking successful. It gives us the record that we need in a format that we've used. We use a comment resolution form, and that's kind of our documentation anyway. That really hasn't changed with the digital review.
Thank you. And thank you to George, Ahmed, and Vern for presenting and giving us the status of model as a legal document within your states. George, we're on to the next section of the webinar.
Great, thanks. So this is going to be a contractor panel discussion. And I guess being a self-proclaimed BIM nerd, this is the one that I'm the most excited about. So today we've got 4 representatives of the transportation contracting community, and we're going to have them give us their perspective on model-based, excuse me, that's easy for me to say, model-based digital delivery and the model as the legal document. We have Matt Blake. He's the Director of Virtual Design and Construction for Lane Construction. Today he's representing Lane Construction and ARTBA. In his current role with Lane Construction, he works closely with several departments to develop and integrate digital practices and workflows in the company's standard operating procedures. He serves on the Innovation and Technology Forum with ARTBA to advance digital delivery across the industry. Matt brings 28 years of experience related to infrastructure and transportation sectors of the industry. He has a BS in construction management from Colorado State University and has always had a passion for technology, process improvement, and efficiency. Logan Whitehead is a design coordinator for Ralph L. Wadsworth Construction. He has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Utah, 6 years of experience as a design consultant, and 3 years as a design coordinator and digital delivery specialist for Ralph L. Wadsworth. He's been heavily involved in the process development for UDOT's digital delivery program, and RLW, or Ralph L. Wadsworth, has pursued and constructed multiple projects with digital delivery elements, including projects with the model as the legal document. Rochelle Van Deventer, I hope I got that right, Rochelle, is the Vice President of the Industry Relations for Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association. I think that's MITA, but I'm not sure if it's MITA or MITA. She has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Michigan State University and brings over 21 years of transportation-related experience. In her current role at MITA, she serves as one of the industry's lead liaisons with federal, state, and local agencies in Michigan. Prior to joining MITA, Rochelle worked at the Michigan DOT and in the consulting industry in various areas. Most notably, she was the Engineering Support Services Manager at MDOT, where she facilitated statewide implementation of e-construction and 3D modeling. Rochelle is a registered engineer in the state of Michigan. And finally, we've got Greg Dommermuth, who has been a project manager with Harrison and Burroughs Bridge Construction for 7 years. Harrison and Burroughs performs 40 to 60 million a year, primarily for New York State DOT and Thruway. Greg is currently the PM on New York State DOT's Region 8 model-based contracting pilot project. This $23 million project replaces a 360-foot bridge span with a new 800-foot structure and includes the demolition of 12 structures of 50,000 cubic yards of excavation embankments in new road alignments and flood mitigation. So today, Alexa, Mitchell, and I will be basically taking turns in asking these contractors some questions and listening to their discussion about where they are. So let's move to our panel discussion, and we'd like to kind of start with the basics. I'm going to direct this first question to Matt. Matt, can you share your experience with model-based delivery?
Sure. Thanks for having me on this. Appreciate it, George and others. We primarily work in the design build arena. So just naturally through design build, we deliver our projects through a digital delivery means, and we've had great experience, and that's for many reasons. It provides a platform for accuracy, transparency, collaboration, timely data, review processes are much faster. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, George, it's repeatable, and those are some key pieces to this whole process of being efficient that we see in this process. So, thanks.
Great, thanks, Matt. Rochelle, how about from sort of the industry's perspective?
Yeah, thanks, George, and yeah, thank you for having me today. I will say we do pronounce it MITA, but you did a great job with my name, so.
I got 1 out of 2.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, I have a unique background. So my experience, I did come from the design side of things. I was in road design for a long time, and it included time at the DOT here in Michigan. And for a while, I was even in the area of engineering support and involved in HEEP. And then since I've come over to MITA, I've been the industry representative working with the DOT on how they're going to be doing things with the model delivery. We're still in the piloting phase here in Michigan, but it's really helped, I think, having all of those different perspectives and being able to bring those to different conversations that we've had.
Great. So, Greg, you guys are actually doing a project in New York or completed, right? You want to give a little perspective on that?
Yeah, we're actually we're going into season 2 of the 2-year project on that Route 28 New York State DOT pilot project. So far it's gone very well. For Harrison and Burroughs, it really propelled us forward as far as embracing technology, and how this contract was set up. There was 100 sheets of paper plans, for work zone traffic control, erosion control measures, signage, striping, just general notes and standard details. So you're going back and forth between that and the model, but we got the information from DOT from the model to give to our surveyors to create TINs for our own GPS layout using Trimble, and then we also are using automated machine guidance from that. So that's my experience with it so far.
Excellent. Logan, how about you? And maybe even a little bit of your pre-construction and how you've used that as a contractor.
Yeah, George. So, I mean, similar to Matt, I mean, we have experience, you know, that was really driven by the design build world, alternative delivery, where we work directly with our designers, looking to gather information from them to take into our construction models and also into our, you know, in our estimating phase. But we've also had a lot of experience working with UDOT and some of their pilot projects up until, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. Obviously, you know, with my background in design, it's helped us facilitate some of the software challenges that a lot of the contractors face as they're learning some of these new tools. But you know, we've seen a lot of benefits in being able to have access to all that information and having UDOT stand behind that information as legal documents. It helps us have confidence in the information provided. So
Great, Logan. You know what? I think we're getting a little feedback on your mic. I don't know if it's where you're sitting or whatever, but
okay.
you know, with that, you guys, and I'm going to go back and maybe start with Matt, but jump in at any point with the discussion. You know, do you see things that are working well and things that maybe aren't, or what you're struggling with? How'd you overcome the challenges? And you know, for Rochelle, if you're seeing things that you hear about concerns of moving in this direction, same thing. You know, what are you guys hearing, and what's your experience in that regard?
Sure. Some things that work well, certainly the streamline of information, the continuity, and using that information from the pre-bid pursuit effort through the bid phase and then on into construction and managing the project. You know, having that, I'm sure you've all heard another buzzword, right? The single source of truth, and it's keeping that single data stream and all of us working towards that end goal, so we're using the same data to get there. I think just quickly a couple things that you know, challenges, I guess you might say, working with DOTs on projects and different owner clients, in that their design software sometimes don't necessarily align with perhaps you know, what their desires are. Sometimes designs are asked for in older versions, whereas we're, you know, I think as contractors and designers and owners alike, you know, we're all trying to push the boundaries and get more efficient with what we're doing. And I think sometimes there's just a misalignment between what's requested from clients and owners versus what we're pushing the boundaries and able to provide through these new technologies and means.
As contractors, do you guys have a concern with the single source of truth? Meaning, if you've got a model in Trimble like a TopCon AgTech, and the DOT's got a model in Autodesk or Bentley, it seems like there's two sources of the truth. So do you have that concern?
We do. I think historically that's what you've seen, George, is the plans were issued on a project. The contractor, as was mentioned before, has taken that data, 2D data typically, and recreated a model on their side to generate quantities and help their planning efforts to bid the project more competitively. And I think as we move forward into this, you know, digital delivery mindset, model as a legal document, I think that transparency that's brought from the single platform and reviews being conducted electronically, but we're all looking at that same data. So I think I know Lane and other contractors as well, we'd like to see that challenge go away, you know, working off the same data. And I guess I would add to that, there's the design model as we talked about, but then there's building information on top of that, it kind of becomes a contractor's model, construction model, if you will, in our eyes. So we're never looking to change the design data. What we're looking to do is add to the metadata and the data contained within that model and attached, so that we can better plan and produce the project.
Rochelle?
Yeah, so thank you. I would say when we talk about, you know, what we see as successful, there's definitely contractors in different places with this, and where we are right now, it makes a lot of difference if everybody working on it really has teamwork and partnership mentality. I think if you look at the big picture and everybody thinks about the big picture, it makes sense where we say we want to go. but we're not there yet. So it's going to take a lot of work to get everybody there. And having the good attitudes for everyone on the team really goes a long way. The contractors are usually on board and they want to be, you know, helping towards this. But if not everybody who's part of the project is, you know, in that same state of mind, or if they're still trying to kind of fight the contractor on things, it definitely hurts, you know, the success of the project.
Yeah, and this is seen right from well, you see it a lot from, say, subcontractors who are really struggling just to figure out the model, or, you know, my example goes back to our rebar subcontractor who, right from their designer, the guys in the field don't know, say, spacing or, you know, what size bar, but in the model, obviously, that's an attribute there. There's a disconnect from those foremen in the field actually using that model. So what they had to do is they had to get their design sheets made up, replacement drawings made up, and you're slowly getting the buy-in from subs, but there's a struggle there, and a lot of times it comes from suppliers and subcontractors. And what I see is they use AutoCAD a lot of times, and we're using Bentley in this case for the model. So those engineers pulling data from the model are struggling to get things to come over correctly, and that just everyone loses a little confidence on that.
Logan?
Yeah, George, can you hear me better now, hopefully?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge when we have, you know, models in different softwares. We definitely have seen some challenges with different softwares delivering maybe some different results or some different perspectives. But at the end of the day, you know, I think Matt said it great when he said, you know, it's about that transparency and that partnering that Rochelle alluded to, right? So if we are all working to build the project correctly and get to the answers. I mean, the source of all that information is in the data, and as we have more access to that information that the designers have as contractors, it builds our confidence that we can, you know, do things correctly. There's, you know, we've had experience on some of these projects where we've had some discrepancies in the models, you know, but we've been able to determine, you know, where those issues are as we've you know, dove into the different, you know, whether it's a Bentley model or a model that we've built in Trimble, and figured out what the differences are. And it does help us having access to all that data. We can get back to the correct answers. So moving forward, I mean, that you know, more seamless data transfer between softwares is what I envision is one of the keys, right? So we have access to the same data, and what we do with that data may be different, but having access to that source data that is that's really important. We can transfer data back and forth and get on the same page.
And I would add, sorry, George, I would add to that. I think, you know, having the single source of truth and getting on the same page with our transparency and our model and all of that, you know, it stems from the work that the committees and Building Smart and others are doing that we talked about in the beginning of the webinar of getting standards simplified across our industry and aligning with ISO standards so that we are all talking the same language. I think splitting infrastructure, construction, and transportation aside from the commercial world, I think the commercial construction world has done this, you know, over the last many years, and whether it's a categorization or level of detail, and they've accepted and agreed what those standards are. I think we're in the process of doing that for ourselves, and I think when we can get to that point and be talking the same language, the same nomenclature, the same terminology across the board, I think we're going to make light years progress in what we're talking about.
Yeah, so before moving to that next question, and Rochelle, what I was going to say is, I think what you said is really true, which is there's a lot of people listening today who haven't done this, and there's a need to work together. And I think what you're hearing is there are still some things that are being figured out, and there's some challenges. But I think if, as project teams and DOTs, you work with the contractors, what you're going to find is that this is a really good direction to go in. So Alexa, you want to go with the next question? Alexa, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you now.
So moving it forward. Okay, how about it? Are you guys hearing it? Okay. What is your vision for model-based delivery to be successful in the future? You touched on some of those things, but now that you have a big audience to kind of share your thoughts of what you would like to do next, what are some of those thoughts? And let's go ahead and start with Rochelle.
Okay, thanks, Alexa. I guess one of the things I wanted to add about the part about being successful first, I wanted to give a shout out to our DOT, because one of the things that they've done well here at MDOT in Michigan is they've included us in the conversations and working on the processes that they would go through for implementation. So I think that's been very important to involve your contractors, and if you have an association in your state, to work with them on what it is that the goals are for the DOT and the model-based delivery. And looking at it as part of the legal document, I think some of the things that we've, worried about is really what happens when there's versions after the letting, and who owns, revisions that are necessary, and how those processes are going to be handled. There's already a little bit of disconnect here in the state with how as-built are handled and who is in charge of those as-built. So knowing that just in the 2D process that we have, those are some concerns. I think there's a lot to figure out on how we're going to handle things with the 3D as the legal document.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll chime in here. I mean, we've been, doing this for a couple of years now, both on bid build projects and design build projects. One of the things that I think has helped over the past few years is as UDOT has brought all the contractors into the rooms to hear what their struggles are. Rochelle, you alluded to that, to bringing the contracting community in and hearing what they need. And one of the things that really helps over the past few years is we've gotten more consistent with how these projects are delivered. Not only ourselves as a general contractor, we know more what to expect, but we can also disseminate that information to our subcontractors a lot easier, and they're getting more familiar with the process. For the first few years, it was a bit of a struggle because different projects were delivered differently, and that gets a little difficult to retrain everybody on different software tools and things like that. We've tried to define a process that's a little bit more basic but more standardized, and that's definitely one of the things like we've talked about in this webinar, just getting more standardized in how that process goes and how that data is transferred, and being consistent with that is really important for the contracting community to be able to adapt and get on board and get trained and move forward. So we don't have to relearn it every time a new project's let out.
Yeah, consistency, that's a big thing, Logan. I think at Lane anyhow, we're coming up with a document similar to the guidance documents that are put out there, and the intent with that is to better outline what we expect and what we need from a 3D model-based environment. And someone had also mentioned earlier in the webinar, there's multiple 3D models. It's not, one model per se covers all the needs. There's a lot of different stakeholders here and folks working on pieces of this to come together. So we're working to put kind of a standardized guidance document that we can hand off to contractors and then work together so that expectations are met for what we would like to see. And that's everything from QTO and planning and scheduling through that pre-bid phase and execution phase, but also incorporating AMG needs in there as well for that execution phase in machine guidance as we move forward. But all collaborating in that same environment and having that standard flow is crucial.
So I have a question for Greg. You mentioned when we were preparing for this webinar how helpful it was to have that work with the DOT ahead of the time of the project. Can you elaborate and share some of that with our group today?
Yeah, so right from before the letting, DOT had instructions, good instructions with videos on how to download, say, Bentley iViewer, how to download all the contract documents properly, how to save it, just to get all contractors to buy in that way, because this is the first project in New York State to do it. So that helped a lot. But then once we were low bid and I believe waiting for award, we did all go in and sit down with DOT to get training on the Bentley, the model itself on the iViewer. Harrison and Burroughs, we brought in some superintendents, field personnel, myself, DOT's inspection staff was also there. That way we were all listening to the same training. It took about a full day. We had our surveyor come in so they knew how to download the correct, files that they needed to create our TINs. So that was just a very positive thing that just, again, gives everyone confidence in this process. I think you're muted still.
Yeah, Alexa, you're muted again.
Yes, I am. Okay, I'm not muted anymore. One of the questions from the audience that I'd like to direct to you guys is, and we'll start with Logan, since you have been working on so many of the Model as Legal Document projects. Have you seen a need for designers to rethink how they design in order to provide more useful data?
Yes, definitely yes. I think maybe I'll take this a little bit of a different direction, but besides just yes, in that I think, or my hope is that as we work together with the designers and as the designers have a better understanding of how us as contractors, how we're using that data and that information, it changes the way that they design in terms of, understanding what we need to build the project and understanding what we need to quantify the project and how to kind of check those things in a way that produce a better, not just a better model, but a better project. I don't know if that makes sense, but we see a lot of times, especially with, all the volumetric measurements and earthwork and other things like that, that sometimes the designers don't have a perfect understanding of, what goes into calculating those quantities, and having that information as a legal document definitely, I think puts a little bit more pressure on the designers to make sure that they understand how we're viewing it and how we're using it, and that I think is better for everybody, right? So the department can have more confidence that the contractor understands the project and the design intent of the project, but also that the designers understand what the contractors need to build it. So, and I think that has been a learning curve for sure on a couple of the past projects that we've done. We've done some of these as legal document as a CMGC contractor. We've bid on some of these projects as a bid build, and I think we're starting to see some of that change. But it definitely, I hope that it affects how the designers deliver the information to us with feedback from us on how we use it and the importance that it is the legal document, and it needs to be more accurate, more clear, more consistent, and it needs to be designed a little bit more thoroughly. So.
I would agree, Logan. Those are great comments. I think, although not a model as a legal document scenario, directly, we have incorporated this type of mindset on a couple projects, and taking, you know, a short 30-minute Zoom call out and having the interaction with a designer, and I put it on the screen and explain to them why we are asking for either, you know, maybe a certain mesh or another closed shape to be added in certain areas of the model, and why that's important to us, and how we then take that and build a, you know, our QTO and our bill of quantities for the, in many cases, the design build proposal. And again, that's eliminating risk. It's mitigating a lot of factors that go into the unknowns when you bid a project. So the more we can fine tune that and refine it, I think makes everyone happier and more competitive on the project.
Great. Another question that came through the audience, the Q&A, is, are there advantages to using any specific delivery method, design build, design bid build, or CMGC when using digital deliverables? From an industry perspective, Rochelle, what are you hearing from your members?
Thanks, Alexa. You know, we haven't had too many where the model has been a contract document yet. MDOT has been providing them in the RID, and so I would say it's definitely been more beneficial when they've been on design build jobs, because the consultant is working for them and it's really their model, the contractor's model. It's been helpful for some contractors when it's in the RID. I know that they do get used, but at the same time, depending on the conversation, because it is RID or reference information documents, there are a lot of contractors say it's RID, they can't really use it because it's not contractual. So it makes a big difference that it isn't contractual and not being able to depend on that over the other documents. So once we get some projects where the model is the contract in a design bid build, I think we'll have a better idea.
Okay. Greg, now that you've been through your first digital delivery project, do you see any advantages to using digital deliverables on a very specific alternative method?
Well, in our case, I mean, I'd say, well, we're still going through it, but right off the get-go, it's helpful just to visualize the project, right? So even for bidding purposes, one thing I would say is I think it worked in our case, especially being the first one, because we have itemized contracts, so we know what quantities and how much are supposed to be in that model. So I think that helps a lot, especially, you know, subs and everything, trying to give prices. So I don't know how it would necessarily work on maybe if there were more lump sums, that kind of thing. I think it'd be harder for people to visualize how to actually bid the job accordingly. But I guess since we're kind of still in our infancy here, I don't know how much more I could talk to that one from New York State perspective.
Logan, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, we've like I said, we've implemented a lot of these processes into our alternative delivery, you know, design build. We've done CMDCs with UDOT. We've bid some projects that have been bid build. We've seen benefits to all aspects. I think, you know, as you're defining the process, I definitely think some of those alternative delivery methods are helpful to be able to have the contractor in the room to be able to provide some feedback as the design progresses and see what's working and what's not. As the process has become more defined, I think, you know, at least here in Utah, UDOT's, I think, gotten more comfortable in letting some of those projects out as bid builds. And at that point, I think it becomes less of a, you know, delivery method and more of a, you know, what's the project scope? What are the benefits to a digital delivery for this specific project? And I think that's the best way to base the decision, you know, on if there's some benefits, is really the scope of the project. But having the contractor's perspective in the alternative delivery realm certainly helps. On design builds, you know, we have not delivered any any models as the legal documents back to the department, but we do implement a lot of these processes into the, what we ask our consultants to deliver to us for our documentation, our deliverables to be able to build the project. But to this point, we've still been delivering, the traditional paper plans back to the department. I envision that will change in the future, though.
Got you. And Matt, I know that in previous conversations, you and I had talked about how some of these digital deliverables are helping you in design build. Can you expand on that conversation we've had before?
Sure. You're right. In design build and CMGC, I think they lend themselves to this collaborative environment just inherently. And I think we're seeing great benefit in working in that early stage with a model and our designers, so that we can get call it early quantities and early direction and timely outputs from the design that we're the preliminary design, so that we can direct our designers to make changes and drive that innovation and ATC process, so that we can become be more competitive for the owner and provide them a project that hopefully answers more than what they're asking for, brings innovation to the project and efficiencies. And it's in a traditional design build world, historically, it's been advanced thinking early on, but it's a little bit delayed in the sense of waiting several weeks or months before you can get enough tangible data. I think this process expedites that and puts it to the front of the pursuit process, so that we can make those timely decisions and move forward with everyone's best interests.
Great. I think we have time for a couple of more questions. Since there are no drawings or cut sheets, how are field staff measuring and constructing in the field? Are you guys cutting sheets or shop drawings for field crews? Let's start with you, Greg.
Yeah, so in our case, well, we got all our foreman iPads to view the Bentley model on. That I would say did not work in year one. We found it very difficult to navigate those, twist around, zoom in, try to take accurate measurements, get elevations off the model. So that was a struggle. So they've come to me, I've printed out different cross sections or from different saved views, basically written down on it what elevations and what you're looking for. As far as the layout side, the trimble part, it's been huge. It's been great. So you have good accurate layout. It's just the getting your elevations as far as a constructability point of view.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real quick, Greg. I mean, we've had similar success and struggles on different tools to use these in the field. We definitely, have become more proficient as a general, and we also have to be more cognizant of what our subcontractors need, right? A fencing subcontractor may not be as keen to pull out the iPad and figure out where, what type of fence and where it goes. He just wants us to tell him what type of fence goes where. But so it is maybe a little bit more coordination on our end on some items, but it certainly saves us on a lot of others in the model development for AMG and different things like that. So there's good and there's been some struggles, but again, as we've defined the process a little bit more, we understand it better, and then also our subs understand what they what they need better, and we can provide them that information as long as we have all the data there. So whether it's in a sheet or whether it's in a electronic file format, as long as we have the data and it's accessible to us, we can usually disseminate that information fairly efficiently. But sometimes it is a little bit more work for us.
So Logan, I'd like to add to that. I really like how you brought in how that works with the subcontractors, and that's something that I think is very important to keep in mind and that we hear about a lot, is just that coordination between the prime and the subcontractors and how things are going to go. And then not only when the project is underway, but also in the bidding process. So it's important that whoever's putting the project out doesn't lose sight of what is needed for the contractors to be able to bid the job appropriately. And the subs are usually all across the board and where they are with being able to handle this information and use the information. So again, big picture, I think it's understood and makes sense where everybody wants to go, but there may be some things that will be important to provide in the transition period so that the subs do have what they need to bid a project and work on a project and have that relationship with the prime that is necessary.
And I think if I could add to that a little bit, I think having what we need to bid the projects, I think inherently there's a difference between that bid build model based delivery. That's just going to be more complete because it is more time has been spent on that from the client and the owner providing it to the contractors for a bid purpose. I think in a design build world, you know, we go through that iterative process. We work with our designers, you know, and what that model ends up being, you know, we're getting the information out and what's required of that, I think depends on the scope of work and the discipline, you know, and I think some of the efforts being made in the industry are developing and defining what that level of development looks like for the infrastructure transportation sector. And I think that's important because on a design build effort, I may not want all elements on the project to be designed to the same level of detail. I might need more detail on a bridge structure or a drainage system and maybe less on a roadway section and the appurtenances. So it just depends on the type of scope that's included on the project and to what level that each contractor thinks they need. But bid build projects inherently, I think, will have definitely more detail out of the gate.
So I think we have, do we have 15 or 5 minutes left? I lost count here, but I would like to ask you one last question, guys. And that is, what advice do you have for the highway owners and designers attending today's webinar? And we'll just start with Matt and work our way.
I would say one thing that will help the process, I think in my view and contractors' view the most, is updating, I think, software platforms. And I understand it's certainly a task to call it retool or retrain forces within in departments. But I think getting up to speed with some of the latest developments and that will align better with what's being asked of in, say, in a 4D sense or 5D. As we progress into these different needs and requirements in an RFP, we need to make sure we have the proper design workspaces established to be able to develop and deliver those in the best manner possible.
Rochelle?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, as mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, you know, working with the contractors is very important and it is advice I would give. But not just that, I think one of the things that's important as you're working with your contractors is that you are open to changes and actually listening to the feedback and, you know, making some modifications based on what it is that they are saying that they need or, you know, how they're experiencing what it is that you've been working on. So I think having that open mind is very important.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think staying consistent with deliverables will be huge. But then in saying that, obviously keeping a lessons learned log on each of these projects as they go forward. I mean, there's going to be some changes that need to be made. It's going to be important to get input from your contractors. And yeah, I think that'll be the biggest thing going forward and make it successful.
Awesome. Logan, last words?
Yeah, similar comments. I mean, defining the process and staying consistent, but also recognizing that it's an evolution and that's always going to be changing. And you know, we're not going to have a fully defined perfect process before start, and we've appreciated that. I mean, we've come a long way in the past few years with us and with our subs. You know, the process has changed a lot, but it's also become a lot more refined as we've been, you know, as UDOT's been committed to it. So, you know, committing to it and trying to define the process and then continually improving it as it goes would be my advice.
Hey, Logan, really fast. I think the other thing that, at least from UDOT's perspective, that has been super helpful is that collaboration, not necessarily on the project, but, you know, committee, workshops and things of that nature. What's your thought from a contractor's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Having you know, the department clearly committed to having everyone in the room, having everyone's voices heard, so not just the one or two contractors, or, you know, even all the you know, the major prime contractors, but having everyone have a voice, but also recognizing that, you know, we need to kind of get a consensus and move a direction forward. But having everybody involved, I think, gets everybody bought into the process and helps us again improve on what we've learned in the past and keep it moving forward and improving upon it and getting better. But part of that is just that commitment to jumping in and giving it a shot and getting everybody bought in to improve it. So.
Okay, so I guess with that, guys, we would like to thank you for participating in today's panel, and I am going to hand it over to George to do the last Menti in this section.
All right. If you want to put the next slide up, one of the things we'd like to see from contractors and from agencies is, what's your experience with the model as the legal document? So if you go to the poll and put your information in, that would be great. And then we will show these results probably after Elaine has a little bit of time to sort of give some final thoughts. And if we could publish that link again, just in case, since we don't have it on the bottom, that might be helpful. All right, great. So let's turn it over to Elaine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Richard. I work for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I've been there for 26 years, 10 as a highway designer and 16 in AC applications, supporting CAD and all the BIM initiatives and digital data. Connecticut is also very involved with getting our BIM initiatives out within our department. We had the opportunity to present back in August of 2020 to a smaller group with just a BIM webinar, and we'll be happy to provide those that PowerPoint presentation along with this one on the HEEP's website, so you can kind of see what we went over months ago. So yeah, this is just going to be the wrap up now. I got four final items to go over. Next slide. And I guess next slide, we're going to go over the input and future topics. I think Sandra mentioned earlier that I didn't get to all the questions, but we are going to review the questions, get our panelists to answer them, and then we're going to supply that frequently asked question sheet up on our website, or maybe we'll email it out to everyone that signed up to view our webinar today. We're also going to be putting out a post survey looking for potential future topics for webinars and workshops. We're also going to be asking your preferred ways of communication and collaboration related to BIM for infrastructure. Next slide. And we're going to talk about future events. So we're going to be having these webinars quarterly this year. So we're planning the next one for sometime in June, and we will base that content on what we hear for the questionnaires that come in. Base it on, what we hear from you. And everyone that registers today will receive an invitation in the future for future events. And next slide. And then also we have some conferences coming up. Some of them will be virtual. Some of them we don't know if they're going to be virtual yet, or how we're going to have them yet. So our HEEP annual conference is planned for the beginning of December at this point. And then Building Smart is having their virtual summit in mid-March to late March. And then the Transportation Research Board, they just had theirs in January. They did theirs virtually, and it was run very nicely. Went to some of the sessions and it was well done. So I don't know, January 2022, I don't know if they're going to be virtual at that point or it's going to be in person again, but I'm sure they're going to let you know. And then there's the AASHTO Committee on Design, and that is planned for July. And again, I'm not sure if that's virtual or we're going to try to have that in person, but I'm sure they'll have that on their website or they'll communicate with you. And next slide. And now we're going to just talk quickly about our IHEEP conference. I think did we skip over a slide? Yeah, okay, there we go, thank you. So our conference is held each year, and we haven't done one virtually yet, but we do like to get together and collaborate in person. Every year, depending on who's president that year, that state usually hosts the conference. We have technical sessions, breakout sessions, roundtable sessions, panel discussions, keynote speakers, special icebreaker events, and we also have an exhibit calls with sponsors. Randy, do you want to bring our website up now? There we go. So we don't have time to view our whole video there, but if you go to our website, HEEP.org, we have a video why IHEEP. So I encourage you to click on that link later and view why everybody loves IHEEP and why everyone comes back year after year. And also underneath that is going to be an area where we're going to tell you when our upcoming webinars are. And then underneath that is just a little blurb of the next 3 years. So this year we're planning to either meet virtually or have the conference in Connecticut. And then 2022 is Florida. And then 2023 is Utah. And we can go back to the slide presentation now. And yeah, okay, so areas of focus. Of course, BIM for our infrastructure, right? I feel like IHEEP's been doing BIM since before there was a name for BIM. They were doing BIM. They're talking about BIM. And everything related to BIM, 3D modeling, design and construction integration, digital project delivery, model-based project delivery, digital twins, e-construction, digital data document management, data governance, GIS, asset management, managing changing software environments, drone use, and these are the two fun ones, right? The drone use and augmented and virtual reality. Next slide. So here's an update on the IHEEP conference. We're targeting for the beginning of December. We're hoping we can do it in person, but honestly, we just, with the pandemic, we just don't know yet how we're going to have it, in person, virtual, and maybe hybrid. But we will, keep everyone informed and maybe look for some feedback from everybody too on, what we should do this year. So again, it was supposed to be in September, and we just tried to push it out as far as we could in the year to hopefully be able to meet in person. But if not, we're definitely going to do something since we skipped last year. So if you want information on updates on our conference. There is the website for that. And yeah, that wraps up talking about the IHEEP conference, so we can move to the next slide. Now we're going to do a Menti with our webinar evaluation. So if you can please go to the Menti now and fill that out, that'd be appreciated. Okay, in closing, I would like to thank everyone who was involved in planning this event. It was a lot of work, but it was fun meeting everyone and working with everyone. HEEP is looking forward to working with Building Smart and TRB on future BIM events. We are fortunate today to have such wonderful expert guest speakers, moderators, panelists, and appreciate all you did to make this event successful. Thank you everyone for attending today's session, and we hope you found it helpful and informative. If you have additional questions, here's a slide with all the chairs and presidents and representatives from today. You can email us with any questions, and then also links to all of our websites. And I think I caught everything I was supposed to say. So we thank you in advance for your support to help carry our vision to exchange information, ideas, and experiences. But I think we did want to go back right to some of the Menti polls. Was there anything we wanted to show, George?
Yeah, the Menti poll, I think, is Randy just pulled that up. This will be good to kind of see where everyone wants to know what the future should look like in these webinars. That'll be super helpful. And then participation, looking at who's in this. I guess that's what this one is, Randy, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like the background is, and you know what? I can't see it because it's pretty small. Randy, what are those?
This one is the goal to have inclusive industry participation with the transportation industry BIM for infrastructure webinar series. This was the what was your background. And you can see majority were consultants or public agency employees.
Okay, and then there was one other Menti, is that right?
Yeah, and next one was on the pooled fund. I can hardly read it myself. First one was establish open standards for data. You can see 200 people. Guidelines on model-based digital delivery. Level of detail and level of information seem to be the one that people are most interested on initially. Industry coordination and collaboration. 151. Digital as-built information requirements. 170 people. Best practices, again, that's almost the same as the guidelines there. Business case for moving transportation, you can see 97, and then other is other. It looks like people are most interested in, guidelines and best practices at the moment moving forward.
Right. Is there one more Menti result?
There's a couple more, I think.
Okay.
Model-based delivery or design construction, you can see how that's going. I mean, most everybody looks like they're planning on doing it in the next couple of years, or already starting to do it now. It might be interesting to talk to the 23 people that aren't planning on ever doing it. They're all architects, I imagine. That was that one. Experience with the legal document, or the model as a legal document. This one is no experience as a contractor. This one is some experience with a contractor. The next two, this one is no experience but planning on it. So even the contractors are looking forward to it. No experience or plans to do model as a legal document for agencies. Next is agencies with some experience, and no experience but planning. And again, 22 are still not planning on anything at this moment. They're going to wait until all the arrows get pulled out of the backs to move forward. And last but not least was, what did you think of the webinar? So I think that wraps it up, George.
All right, well, we're just about at the top of the hour. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and I'm going to give one last plug for HEEP. For me, it's one of my favorite conferences to go to. It's a great collaboration of professionals who are working to bring this BIM to being used everywhere. It's contractors, it's vendors, it's DOT, it's consultants, it's people in the industry who are looking to make this happen. So if you can join us, we would love to have you. And with that, let's wrap it up and say thank you. Have a great day.